What's the difference between responsible to and responsible for?
I think the first place I really heard this concept was from our trusty old book back here, Cloud and Townsend's Boundaries. I'd show it to you, but Charlie Brown's sitting on top of it right now. But I think they just simply say something to the effect of that we are responsible to others and for ourselves, right? And that, if you really think about it, that's kind of countercultural.
It is.
Right? Because especially like in the world of parenting, in fact, Hal Runkle, who wrote the book Scream Free Parenting,
Right.
he addresses this in there too, because one of the most common things that you hear people say when they're frustrated with your children is, you need to take responsible for your kids. And then there are other things set up in our system that punishes parents for poor behavior of kids. And so, and I don't have a solution to that system.
Right.
But this idea of what does it mean to be responsible to versus responsible for is something that is not just. It's easy to see in the context of the parent-child relationship, but it's also existing amongst all relationships.
Sure.
Right?
And I think too that when we are helping individuals or couples repair from betrayal trauma, this concept can really start to become crystallized. I work with a lot of partners, and as we start kind of processing through what has happened and that difficult question of how did this happen, what a lot of partners start kind of identifying a pattern of is that they became way too responsible for others in their family, their partner, their children, whether they're young children or even adult children. And a lot of the work becomes establishing boundaries where you are responsible for yourself, for your well-being, for your mental health, for your needs, and continuing being relational and being connected to other people, responsible to those connections and not for those connections. Some real clear examples are things like, I always kind of tease moms like, how old are your kids? Oh, that's how many years it's been since you had a hot meal, right? Those kind of things, because you're being responsible for everybody else's needs at the dinner table, and then you're eating the cold chicken, right?
Exactly.
And so that's a concrete example, and I'm not going to solve it. I'm not even saying it's right or wrong. Guilty as charged.
Sure.
However, it's I think a nice symbol that gives you something to kind of reflect on.
Sure. Yeah, I think if we're all being honest with ourselves, we all battle this somewhere in our life.
Sure.
We tend to naturally drift toward being a responsible for person.
Sure.
But let's just talk a little bit, like give some examples of what that looks like.
Okay.
So the first thing, before I give examples, the first thing I want to say to that though is that a responsible for person or that type of approach to life is going to I think is partially responsible for creating complacency in relationships. It's partially responsible for compromising your values and your principles, because the whole idea is that if I'm responsible for you, that means I'm responsible for your well-being. Therefore, I'm also that means I'm responsible for whatever emotion you're feeling, because that's kind of how we judge in our life. What's if things are going good or not good, or if things are dangerous or not dangerous. We have this emotional response to it. That's how one way our emotions help us. And so if I'm a responsible for person, let's just say like as a boss or something, and my employee walks in and they have something going on out in their life and they just aren't happy that day, I'm going to feel like that I need to do something about that. That somehow is my responsibility to make them happy in this context. And so as a result, I might kind of overstretch and just try to pep them up, which could lead to crossing certain boundaries. In terms of like, why is the boss always in my office like trying to give me a pep talk?
Right.
And because my anxiety is kicking in saying, no, this person isn't happy and it's your job to make sure they're happy.
Right.
Whereas a responsible to person in that situation would be able to take a step back and ask themselves, like, okay, this person came in and they're not themselves like they normally are. What is my responsibility to them given my role in their life? You know, and then you go from there. And you're more likely as a responsible to person to hold to good boundaries, to stick to your integrity, you know, and responsible to people aren't afraid of difficult circumstances, or they're not afraid of, what if I have this responsibility to you, it could create some disruption in your life, but I'm not afraid of that.
Right.
Because in turn that disrupts my life too. You know, so going back to parents, for example, discipline. It's our responsibility to discipline our children. It's not our responsibility to discipline our partners, but it is our responsibility to share not just the good things about our lives, but also the difficult things, or the things that are frustrating and are or opposing thoughts or feelings and things like that. And that can be unsettling to the other person, and that's okay. It's my responsibility to share that to them.
That's right. And I think even just kind of taking that the next step further is when you hold to your responsibility for yourself, and then address things with your partner or even your children as responsibility too, you're reinforcing that they're their own person and that they're capable. I can come to you with hard things. I can have expectations for you, and I know you can meet them. And that's really an important as far as building identity, right? And being a family or a partnership where we have a collective identity. We are a family, we are a couple, but we're also individuals, right? So there's kind of a lot of levels to why this is important.
Right. And it's important to realize that you're whatever you determine your responsibility to this person is at any given point in time, that it's going to evolve over time. As life changes, circumstances change, so will your role in that relationship, right? And so one thing that you can do, as if you're really taking, if this is speaking to you, you know, like, I hope that you're saying, I want to be a responsible to person. I don't want to be responsible for anybody. That's even our kids, by the way.
Sure, 100%.
Like, our job is to teach them to be responsible for themselves, you know. And so, but from the moment they're born, we have responsibilities to them. So if you're wanting to be a responsible to person, I think the first step, though, is to look at the relationship and ask yourself, what's going on here? And what do I perceive this person's responsibility to be in that for themselves? Like, what does that look like for them? You know, and then after you you have room to be wrong, okay? But after you kind of have an idea of what that is, then you're asking yourself, now what's my responsibility to them as kind of a player in their life, in a sense.
It's a good way to think about processing that.
Yeah. So responsibility to versus responsibility for. When you're dealing with betrayal trauma,
it's very important.
Right. Both parties are often, whether you're the one who betrayed or the one who has been betrayed, both parties kind of tend to kind of naturally make this hard shift into responsible for. You know, and it's kind of a delicate process to kind of get them back. That's a good way to say it. Untangle it is great.